one of the most difficult things is to be at the peak of resistance in the richest country in the world. And one of the things that our progressive movement lacks is love. Now, I'm not talking about just the pie in the sky, superficial love that, I'm talking about a real love for one another. And once you have that kind of love, a love for your comrade in the movement, a love to make sure that if they're not working, they're eating, to make sure that they're home with their family, a love to make sure that they're getting to the rallies, a love for other people you never will meet, a love for the Iraqi people or the African people or people in New Orleans or just the people here who are poor in Portland or in the Bay or in love. And we have a tendency to want to be right, not to love. We are the most educated, most prolific, articulate movement you can imagine. But sometimes we lack love, and that is why our movement does not go forward. It's the reason why, truthfully, if I asked you all if you could vote for Dennis Kucinich, probably a large number of you would probably say, yeah, I would probably vote for Dennis before I voted for Hillary or Barack. But that is not a choice in this matter, because that is how our movement is. Our movement sometimes is like Dennis. It's a fringe piece. It doesn't get taken seriously. And so that is our problem. So I really wanted to, and let me stay there for a second on that. When the story about Kebu, as many of you know, I am the president of the Hip Hop Caucus. I have done some things, and I will explain that as well. Also, I was a former Air Force officer. As many of you know, because you see my story. The great thing about today, Bill, is I say it a lot, but it's true that in the technology age, YouTube goes a long ways. And so the revolution may not be televised, but it will be uploaded. So, you know what I'm saying? It'll be uploaded. They'll upload it, baby. They'll put it out there. And so you know more about my story. And so in part of that story was that when the hands went up for who was there on February 15th, 2003, who was a part of what was the New York Times called the Second Superpower, because so many people gathered in opposition. I was not there. My hand did not go up. Not that I was not against this war, but I actually was in the Air Force at the time in the reserves. I was an officer in the Air Force, and as a matter of fact, as that was going on, I was tasked to give a sermon. I was a chaplain at Andrews Air Force Base. And if you don't know Andrews Air Force Base, it is the president's base. It's where they have Air Force One. And I was asked, now my views had already started. You have to admit that after 9/11, I am one who who found something very suspicious regarding 9/11 and continue to find things suspicious around that process. And so, and I began to investigate, and when I saw the Trump to war, this seemed not right. And as my obligation as a person in the military, my job was to protect the Constitution from foreign and domestic enemies. And so in that process, I had to give, they knew this, I'm just letting y'all know, it'll be on tape, might be on YouTube, but they knew this, it's not new. But I was tasked to give the sermon on Flag Day, which was February 2003. So they invited all the generals like this out, and the Joint Chiefs, and everybody was there, and Andrews, and I guess they picked me because I was the only brother chaplain, so they probably figured that might be just diversity, look good, we're going to let the brothers preach on Flag Day. And so in that process, I preached, and my sermon was, "Who would Jesus bomb?" Now, I got to admit, I didn't get many amen. I don't think I got a amen. I don't think I got a amen that day. And then when I got finished, they said, well, this might not be the place for you, um, which is okay. So now you got me, and you haven't got rid of me yet, so that's all right. Um,
Amen. That we haven't
no, no. That's good, thank you. And then in that process, I began to join your ranks and speak out in that process. And as many of you know, my country, this Air Force, labeled me a threat to national security, which was very difficult for me, actually. I don't look at these things as the badges of honor. I don't come from that mentality of getting arrested or just being involved in the fray. I actually like simple things in life. I actually like to do this. I don't like getting beaten up in Capitol Hill. I don't like to be labeled I thought the national security. When I couldn't travel, I couldn't get out of London, I was trapped. At that point in time, I was on a no-fly list. I don't like that, actually, especially when I have two little ones. Those things can weigh on you because you can imagine what that is. And so we fought that. And when I beat that case, the Air Force was forced to discharge me with honorable discharge. On that day, when I was found out that I had been released or honorable discharge, this is the story about KBOO, I was given an interview to that, two things about that at KBOO. It's amazing, it's all around the country, but that day I had to do an interview at 11 o'clock at KBOO Eastern Standard Time. And I guess it was early morning drive time. So for y'all who don't listen to that station, you should listen to it in the morning. And in that process of giving an interview, they wanted to know where I was at the General Petraeus hearing and talking about the surge. And we all know that when generals lie, soldiers die. And we also know the reason that we're here isn't so much to be glamorous or to be in some kind of nostalgia aspect. The reality is that while we're here and fighting for change, and I will discuss Barack Obama later, but while we are here for true change, that we also recognize that with our tax dollars, 1 million people have been exterminated off the face of the earth. Now, I don't know how you sleep at night, but when I think about that the tax dollars that I pay for my meals and I pay for tolls and I pay for these taxes, that money was used by a criminal and criminals to exterminate 1 million people and then displaced over 4.5 million internally and throughout the region of Lebanon, Syria, and Jordan. I don't know. So for me, this is no game to me. I'm not here. I didn't fly to Portland because I'm just here to talk or to have a conversation. I am as much to hear from you to discuss what can we really do to build a movement so that nobody has to live with the fact that during their time on this little blue rock that floats around a sun, that they knew that human beings who look like you and me, mothers and fathers and doctors and lawyers and teachers, that our money on this side of the ocean paid for 1 million of them to be exterminated within a 4-year span. And that was not enough, that their country, their land, their history, everything was decimated by they had a civilization for thousands of years by a country that has only been around for a few hundred. That is embarrassing, but that is what is needed for real change. Now, I hear Mr. Obama in his speech, and we'll discuss that, but what is real change is needed is not a Democrat Congress or a Republican Congress, but obviously a human Congress that puts humanity at the forefront. But in that, and so in that, let's get to my role. I am the president of the Hip Hop Caucus. Yes, that takes. And I actually quite enjoy this, and this will lead to our movements. I was a White House intern, and I never say this, but I was a White House intern. I have a master's and a bachelor's. Both my parents have PhDs. And so I grew up in a community and a family, which allowed me to be a typical bougie black person. And in that, being in that role could have sat back and just, had lattes and BMWs and ignored everything around me. But one of the great things about hip hop, and that when I go to preach, you must know that I was actually, one of the reasons I got into the Air Force was because I was thrown out of the church. Because when I started to deal with homelessness and poverty and gang violence, I would bring those kind of people to the church. That really wasn't the place. And it's not that the church is a bad place, it's that like a lot of our institutions in the 21st century, a lot of institutions have become institutionalized, which is important for our movement because a lot of our institutions have become institutionalized, and because of that, they are no longer effective for us to use. We still think we can use them. Civil rights organizations, churches, think tanks, they're now so dependent on raising money or upon foundations that they no longer are used and can be used by a movement. And so that actually hurts us. And because we now look to these organizations to provide for us, thinking that they were the same as they were in the 60s or the 70s or the 80s, we then recognize now that they seem impotent. And they don't seem to have the same fire and punch. They don't seem to have the same analysis to do what needs to be done. There's no sense of urgency. That's what I say. They're now filled with time card activists who can care less, who come to work at 9 and leave at 5 and would not be here because they're doing on health care. If the health care job doesn't pay, then they'll go work on poverty. Poverty doesn't pay, then they'll go work on the war. If war doesn't pay, then they'll go work on whatever it is. But they're not concerned. There's no passion. There's no punch. They're more concerned about their resumes than they are about resistance. And so these institutions have become institutionalized. And so we as a movement have been depending on institutionalized institutions who are impotent. That is one of the reasons why President Bush has not been impeached today. And so with that, one of the things we must recognize in this process as being president of the Hip Hop Caucus is that when I would go to speak, it forced me at churches in different places to get that look of sneer. That look that some of y'all gave for a quick second. Not all y'all pretty good. But still gave that look of not taking me seriously, to know about the background, which is important because that's the same look that people who are oppressed get all the time. They have to prove themselves. You wouldn't know that I had a master's and bachelor's and White House and that kind of background with Air Force officer. And that's good. You shouldn't, that doesn't mean, because as long as there are people who are dying in the streets, it doesn't matter what I have. Again, our movement is the think movement, and we got to break that. It's great to have that mentality, to be able to think through and to have that kind of analytical process. But if we don't have that other piece of love to be connected to those who are being hurt and killed and disenfranchised, we lose it all. And so that's one of the things here when I get up and speak in Hip Hop Caucus, I love that. There are times I'm at churches and I had seen people pack up and leave the church. I mean, this is how serious this is. And many times I'm speaking in front of progressive movements, and they hear Reverend Yearwood, and I actually would stop them, Hip Hop Caucus, and they will then not take it seriously. And that's a problem, because if we're progressive, we should be the ones to take everybody seriously. Because if we don't take everybody seriously in our movement, then we might as well just go to the right and just be judged based upon the amount of money you have and not your content. So let's deal with this process now about with what goes on. I just want to deal with three things. I want to deal with our movement. One, I want to deal with the climate that we're in, and obviously this war. Let me just start with this war. I agree. I'm so glad that Antonia, in with her march, I encourage you. She gave me one of her latest books. We should support all of our progressive artists. It's the way they eat, the way they live. It's important. It's important. We support like the Backbone campaign as well. It's important because this work does take time and money and energy in that process. So we should definitely support these organizations. I know it's hard. I know we're not rich as well, but in a movement, it's very important, and it does so much to do that. Iran is next to some degree. It is important that let me just say this, when I was beaten up, two candidates called me. One kissed me, not the one you would think kissed me. Cynthia McKinney called me up after she saw the videotape because she was with me when we actually crossed the bridge in New Orleans. That was captured on 60 Minutes. The bridge was blocked from people leaving that process. And so she was with me, and she called me up and she saw the videotape and was highly upset because that had been used against her and her tactic. And so she called me up and she told me, I have a lawyer. And I said, I got a lawyer ready. My lawyer's pretty good too. Melanie Sloan is my attorney, the one who represented Valerie Plame, who got against Scooter Libby. So I have a pretty good attorney. And so she called me up, and then she was going to make sure whatever you need, which was pretty good. The other one who then kissed me was Dennis Kucinich, who saw me. I was in my crutches, and he came up and kissed me. I said, hold up, man, that ain't too cool, man. I don't mind that now. You can kiss me now, but come on now, Dennis. Let's get together. You run for the president now. Oh, this kissy kiss stuff. Oh, Randy kissed me again. So I was like, my goodness. No, I tell you. So I was like, great. But that was the thing. So I said as a piece, I never got a call from Hillary Clinton. And that's important because I worked in the White House for the Clintons. And I know most of their staff, and I also know Barack Obama. And I know most of his staff as well. And they both received letters, and I never got a call. That's when they weren't too busy, but obviously when a person of color is beaten in the halls of Congress, that usually would require somebody making a call. I lead into that with this in our movement. Antonia said it correct. Barack Obama and Hillary and those in the Democratic current party, not the progressive Democratic Party, have used our movement. And to give you an illustration of what I mean by that, many of you know soul and Motown. Remember Elvis? Remember Elvis? Now, I'm too young for Elvis, but I saw the videos and I got the picture. But Elvis was a cool white guy. You know what I'm talking about, the cool white guy? Cool white guy. What Elvis did was that Elvis took from the black people their style, their dance, their rhythm, took that exact thing and then went to the Larger and the Ed Sullivan Show, and then voila, Elvis was it. What they didn't know was that people were doing Elvis way before Elvis was doing Elvis. And so, but he benefited for a number of reasons, some obvious, some not so obvious, but Elvis benefited. Barack Obama and Hillary Clinton and those who are on the middle of that process are benefiting from us in this piece. You have to understand that. Don't be discouraged because of that. That's just important for us. What we need to do as we continue on our movement, that we can still shape things. We can still move things, but they are benefiting directly. So Barack and Hillary are like Elvis. They literally seen the moves in the nightclub. They got the little twist. And then in the daytime, they come out and say, voila, I got a new move. And some blue suede shoes. And people think that's, wow, he's a genius. And then when they go to Memphis and they see the tape, they went, wow. Elmore and Leonard look like Elvis on the street corner hustling for change. But Elvis takes that. And that's important because that means that they've taken our language and, they've taken our points, but unfortunately they have not taken our philosophy and they have not taken our passion for change. And that's where it becomes dangerous. Which leads to me this part that I know will probably be on YouTube, but here's the part here of what I think Barack Obama is in this process. Barack Obama is very powerful, and that's a very good piece. If you understand like Elvis or other pieces taking that, that's not a bad thing. And please, Barack Obama is better than McCain. Let's not leave it thinking Rev's confused. Y'all might be, I'm not confused. I don't think I'm confused. I think there's a difference now, obviously. But for our discussions from a progressive standpoint, this is the key. And let me say this also, while he is better than McCain, I'm also not looking for what we have with Condoleezza Rice. I'm not trying to put a black face on U.S. imperialism. And so I'm not trying to put that in that same position as well. I'm not looking for that. I'm not looking for that to be the case. But this is the case. So Barack Obama, to me, is like Jackie Robinson. Jackie Robinson was the first black person, you remember, to break the color line. And what that was, everybody got excited because that meant something for us. We all knew baseball. We were excited. A lot of us were excited. Even those who were in the Negro Baseball League, they were excited about that. And in that process of being excited, and it had to be the right kind of black person. Satchel Paige couldn't, because the first one who would have called him the N-word, he would not have made the second base, he would have been in the stands. Hold up. Run, Satchel, I'm going to run all right, I'm going to run up in these stands. The first one. So Jackie took that, the perfect black person, all the way around, from the looks to the hair to the demeanor, everything. Jackie Robinson was the one who was able to break the color line. And do not think that those who were in baseball did not know that as well. They knew who could break the color line. And not only were the whites cheer, but blacks cheered. Everybody cheered to some degree. There were some who didn't cheer, obviously. But to some degree, people cheered when Jackie Robinson broke the color line. Why do you say that, Rev? Because Barack Obama is the same thing. The problem, though, is that, like, with that, those corporate entities were putting Jackie Robinson in place, not so much concerned about breaking the color line as they were against getting rid of Negro baseball. And unfortunately, what has happened since then is that Negro baseball no longer exists. As a matter of fact, blacks don't even play baseball as much. And so the problem now is if we allow for this without having a plan in place, if Obama is elected, like Jackie Robinson, the problem could be that we could lose our progressive politic the same way that Negro baseball went away as well. That we will become impotent and we will not be able to stand in resistance. Now, we've done it before. When John F. Kennedy was the president and when the Cuban Missile Crisis, people turned, he was young and the same thing, and people turned against him. But it's far different with Obama. We must be very critical of what we stand for and how we stand for it. And so let me just come up with these two little things, and I'm looking forward to a good conversation. Iraq and Iran obviously are there because they have three things you should know: land, water, and oil. And that's one of the main reasons why they are on the radar in this process. Our Congress let us down. The 110th Congress let us down. And so we have to have a different mindset to that. Tomorrow we will be marching, and I'm so happy to hear what Bill said about this, because he said there will be different things that tie into our demonstration. First, it's on a Tuesday, which is critical. I'm not a big fan of weekend marches when everything is closed. I'm also not a fan of, like Dr. King would say, marches that aren't tied to something. Demonstration that is not tied to legislation or demonstration that's not tied to litigation is nothing more than a parade. It's a parade. It's one of the reasons why our movements have not succeeded, because we've had much more parades since this war began than we have had true demonstrations. When we begin to have demonstrations, we will begin to see a change. Also, one of the most important things here in our movement, which is being left out in this process, is people of color. People of color don't romanticize America. They're not that cool with this process. I mean, Richard Pryor said it best. People do the Pledge of Allegiance, we just checking. We just checking. We don't do that quite well. That's why we don't sometimes have hands in the pockets and those kind of things, because it's not that romantic about America. We know it for what it is. Hence, back to your point about Barack Obama, I would like for you to, when you get a chance, I would love to see how Barack Obama deals with trade, being an African-American, because one of the greatest trade disasters is obviously the slave trade. And so in that process, hopefully, he will take trade issues very seriously. So anyways, let me say what I think we need to do in this process. First and foremost, the first thing we do, we cannot be successful by having a segregated movement. I cannot go to the immigration rally and be all brown, and then go to the peace rally and be all white, and then go to the police brutality rally and be all black. We will not be successful if we have a segregated progressive movement in the 21st century. If we do not join our movements together, then we might as well go home. The second thing that is important to note is that we must make them feel it in Congress. Many of you know that I am close with Cindy Sheehan for a lot of reasons. And you might not like her style or approach. But the thing about it is that Congresswoman Pelosi cannot get off that easy. And the only way to make her realize, or all of them realize, is by getting them out of office. In the black community, not too far from where I live, Prince George's County, which is it is considered one of the most influential black communities in the country. We were doing work there, make hip hop, not war, in that community. In the small school like here, not small, but like Portland State, we had a school called Bowie State, which is in Prince George's County. And we mobilized young people around the issue of the war, way before. So when Donna came in, she told them that Al Wynn did not vote for the war. He voted for the war. And in that process, what happened? When they heard that, because community of colors are more against this war, black and brown people are more against this war than any other race. So in that process, what happened? Al Wynn, in the 4th District of Maryland, an 8-term incumbent who was backed by big corporations, will no longer be in Congress next year. Let the doorknob hit you where the good Lord, y'all know how that goes. That's what I'm talking about. We have got to send these buffoons packing. It was mentioned about John Conyers. John Conyers was my mentor. When I worked for the White House, he was my mentor for almost 10 years. I would go to him, and yes, that would give a lot of access, and yes, it would give a lot of influence. But when John Conyers would not do the job that he was called to do as far as impeaching the worst president, then I could have sat back and gave so many excuses and sat back. But what did I do? I went there with 300 people and was arrested in my mentor's office because he had to feel the pressure. But we need that as well. And so we need to change our ability with electoral activism. That's 2. And then finally, I think we need to take a page from South Africa. When South Africa was searching during their crisis time, they would go around the country, as many of you know, and they went out and created the Freedom Charter. And in that Freedom Charter, people would just put down what they thought freedom looked like. So they would just kids would put their handprint on the paper, and then we go from town to town. And they actually used this. It was 50 years before they actually ended apartheid. But they kept that Freedom Charter. Man, you just know, and they would just describe, this is what freedom looks like. We need a democracy charter in America. What does democracy look like? That has been lost. And so we now need to go around from all the communities, black and brown and white and yellow, male and female, straight and gay, theists, atheists. We need to go all around this country doing that same thing, looking at a democracy charter, that we can then take this because something is wrong, because they are not paying the Constitution any mind anymore. But we need to then remind ourselves, what does democracy look like again? Have we forgotten what democracy looks like as well? What does it look like? And that's what we have to do. And so those are those 3 things. And so let me end with this story. We are doing an Iraqi refugee project. And when I was last in Jordan, which was actually now a little while ago, which was in, I guess, August, I went into a hospital room there, and I met with Bethina. And Bethina is a young woman who was about 28 years old. And when we came in there, she was there, and she had the most amazing look on her face. Like, it was just a steel look. Bethina's house had been bombed, quote unquote, incorrectly. And Bethina's husband had been killed in the bombing. And she sat in this hospital with only one leg and her entire stomach being blown away. And when I came in there, I looked at her, and she didn't even say anything. She just had a look like she was looking through us. I can't even explain the look. And then one of our people in our group began to cry because they said, damn, how could we allow for this to happen to you? Because even tomorrow, if we can just even march for a little bit and carry puppets for a little bit, Bethina will never have a stomach again. She'll never have her husband again. And our government actually sent her a note saying, we apologize. We bombed the wrong house. And they think we give you $5,000 and it will drop you off at the Jordanian hospital. Something is wrong, y'all. We are at what I would call our lunch counter moment for the 21st century. If we don't get it right now, 8 years into the 21st century, there will not be a 22nd century. I can never give Bethina her stomach back. I'll never be able to give her back her life back. I can't give her back her yard back or her peace back or her husband back. But what we can do is that we can rise up, one or two or many, in this land and declare that we must make the injustice visible. And when the woman started to cry around Bethina, she said, I don't need your tears. I need your strength. And so, as I started off this conversation, I'm not just here because it's just something that's to be here. I'm not here because it's to get up and chant, yes, we can. I'm not here to give any type of speech, really, that is whatever. I'm here because I, too, can't sleep at night. During my lifetime, I will always see Bethina. During my lifetime, I will know that some 4,000 young men were sent off for a lie while this man's daughters get married and live. And in my lifetime, I will know that almost 1 million Iraqis have been exterminated, all for the cost of greed. While in my country's levees give away and poor black people drown in the richest country in the world. We must be at the peak of resistance. We must take to the streets in Portland and in San Francisco and all around this world. If for nothing that it be recorded that 30 or 40 years from now, that those who look back at this moment and see that George Bush was worse than Hitler, when they look back at this time, they can see our faces and they can see that there was some who said no. We fight for the people. We fight for justice. We fight for humanity. Thanks.